Chief Executive John Lee announces reverse quarantine plan for travelers to the mainland. City's COVID caseload breaks 10,000 mark. University of Science and Technology open campus in Guangzhou. Good evening and welcome. For the first time since March, Hong Kong's daily COVID cases surpassed the 10,000 mark. But soon, Hong Kong residents travelling to the mainland will be allowed to undergo quarantine in the SAR through a closed-loop arrangement before crossing the border. This as Chief Executive John Lee reached a consensus on a reverse quarantine arrangement with mainland authorities via a virtual meeting. Currently, residents who wish to travel to the mainland from Hong Kong will have to fight for one of the 2,000 quotas for quarantine hotels on the mainland each day. Following Chief Executive John Lee's online meeting with officials from Guangdong Province, Shenzhen and Guangzhou, the various sides have agreed to the proposal of reverse quarantine.
After doing this quarantine in Hong Kong, they will be regarded as having fulfilled the 7+3 requirements of the mainland. The main purpose is to, first of all, alleviate the burden of hotels in the mainland and making use of the facilities in Hong Kong.
The trial for reverse quarantine is likely to take place in the makeshift hospital in the Lok Ma Chau Loop, which accommodates more than 10,000 beds. Following the reverse quarantine, travelers will then enter Shenzhen under a closed-loop arrangement. While details have yet to be ironed out, Lee stressed it will be done as quick as possible. Chief Secretary for Administration Eric Chan will be in charge of the planning. Meanwhile, the CE said there were frank and fruitful exchanges during the meeting on ways to strengthen cooperation within the Greater Bay Area. There will be 32 cooperation task forces covering the northern metropolis, anti-pandemic efforts, Nansha, finance, commerce and youth internships. Hong Kong's daily COVID caseload topped 10,000 as predicted by health officials days ago. 11 more COVID-related fatalities were reported overnight. With hospital admissions on the rise, health authorities relaxed the threshold to discharge patients, which takes effect today. More details from Jackie Lin.
A record high in the city's COVID tally since late March, with 10,586 new COVID infections reported overnight. All but 244 cases were locally transmitted. One more COVID-infected child is now in critical condition. The 15-month-old unvaccinated baby girl started to run a fever on Tuesday and tested positive for COVID. She was sent to the United Christian Hospital later that night after developing cramps. The cramps have been relieved and her vital signs remain stable. Meanwhile, the Education Bureau had required all students and teachers to be COVID screened via an RAT over the 2 days leading up to September 1st. Including today, more than 550 students and teachers tested COVID positive. 5 schools have to suspend face-to-face classes for 1 week after logging multiple infections.
These figures seem to be lower than what we expected. In terms of the proportion of students in the community, that should be at least 1/10. But I suppose students and teachers have meanwhile scaled down on their activities in the community as they get ready for school.
When asked if the daily infection tally could reach levels seen during the 5th wave, which peaked at more than 50,000, health officials say the vaccination rates are higher now, and that helps. But the inoculation rates among the youngest and the oldest have left much to be desired, with more worries over hospitals' capacity to handle the influx of COVID patients.
Number of cases exceeding 10,000 is within our expectation. We are more concerned about the burden to the hospital authority, the bed numbers and the services.
So far, more than 2,600 COVID patients have been admitted to hospitals. Starting today, inpatients who only received 2 vaccine doses could be discharged after day 7 of infection, instead of the earlier mandate of a 14-day isolation period. That's given their CT value is higher than 30 with acceptable health conditions. Jackie Ling, TVB News.
Health officials also revealed the government's plan to extend the vaccine pass scheme to children as young as 5 years old. Currently, the scheme encompasses those aged 12 or above. They have to be triple jabbed and hold a blue code to be cleared to enter scheduled premises such as restaurants. But minors aged between 5 and 12 will only require 2 vaccine doses to fulfill the vaccine pass requirement. There would also be a 2-month transition period. The government will release more details next week. Students in Hong Kong returned to school for the new academic year today. In response to the 3-jab regulation earlier announced by the authorities, some parents and students said they will comply with the new rule to guarantee that full-day in-person classes and extracurricular activities can be resumed. Christy Khan has more.
The new school term has begun despite the pandemic still casting a shadow over students' school life. In the morning, teachers from this primary school in Qingyi had to check the body temperature of each student as well as their rapid antigen test results. Students who forgot to do the RAT test had to perform the test at a designated area. My mother thought it was not necessary to do the RAT test today if I did one the day before, this student said. The authorities had earlier announced that students who wish to participate in extracurricular activities are required to have received free COVID jabs from October. Some parents thought they would consider bringing their children to take the third jab prior to the new arrangements taking effect. Separately, this secondary school in Ho Man Tin has more than 90% of its students who have already taken their second dose. We can dine out for lunch if we are taking full-day classes. This enables us to have more interaction with each other, this student said. But the school is facing a risk of switching back to half-day in-person classes if it fails to fulfill the free jab route in November. The principal of the school, however, was optimistic that they will be able to meet the targets. He added that the school has been working on educating students about the importance of taking vaccine. Christy Khan, TVB News.
The Guangzhou campus of the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology began its full operation today. After 3 years of construction, the new campus in Nansha district in Guangzhou officially welcomed its first batch of students. Central government officials, including Secretary of the Guangdong Provincial Committee Li Xi, attended the opening ceremony. Chief Executive John Lee also participated virtually. He said he hopes the new campus will help cultivate more patriotic talent with a global perspective. The Guangzhou campus is jointly operated by the mainland and Hong Kong. It's the first such project approved by the mainland's Ministry of Education. Despite China's strong opposition, the outgoing United Nations human rights chief published a report that accused China of discriminatory detention of Uyghurs in Xinjiang, which may constitute crimes against humanity. Beijing rejected the report, adding the UN Human Rights Office has been reduced to an accomplice of the US and Western nations. The release of the report came on the last working day of the outgoing UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, just minutes before her 4-year term ended. Bachelet visited China in May. She earlier admitted being under pressure to release the 48-page Xinjiang-related assessment. The UN report says so-called serious human rights violations have been committed in Xinjiang in the context of the Chinese government's application of counter-terrorism and counter-extremism strategies. She recommended the Chinese government to take prompt steps to release all those detained in training centers, prisons or detention facilities. Shortly before the report's release, China's ambassador to the United Nations, Zhang Yun, criticized the report.
The so-called Xinjiang issue is a completely fabricated lie out of political motivations.
Beijing called the report orchestrated and completely illegal.
It is a patchwork of disinformation that serves as a political tool for the U.S. and other Western countries to strategically use Xinjiang to contain China. The OHCHR has been reduced to an enforcer and accomplice of the U.S. and other Western countries, enforcing the developing countries to fall into line with them.
The Foreign Ministry in Beijing added people's livelihood in Xinjiang has been improving. More than 60 countries have jointly released a statement to oppose the false report, adding intentions to contain China using Xinjiang are doomed to fail. Still to come on tonight's news. Vladimir Putin will not attend the funeral of late Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev. In war-torn Ukraine, school starts. Welcome back to TVB News. Russian President Vladimir Putin will not attend the weekend funeral of former Soviet Union's last leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, who died Tuesday because of apparent scheduling issues. The funeral and burial plans sum up the cross-currents of Gorbachev's legacy. Tracy Furness has more.
Mikhail Gorbachev's final farewells will be given in the same place where his rigid Soviet predecessors also lay, but he will be buried near men who broke the Soviet mold. Gorbachev, who ended the Cold War between the former Soviet Union and the West, is to lie in state on Saturday in Moscow's House of Unions, which for decades held the bodies of deceased Soviet leaders, including Vladimir Lenin, Joseph Stalin, Leonid Brezhnev, Yuri Andropov, and Konstantin Chernenko. All of them were then interred outside the Kremlin walls. Although Gorbachev brought more freedoms to the Russian people during his leadership, he remains a controversial figure to many Russians today. Mikhail Khodorkovsky, a Russian tycoon who moved to London after spending a decade in prison in Russia on charges widely seen as political revenge for challenging Vladimir Putin's rule, said he met Gorbachev several times since 1989.
В России Горбачева будут помнить, с одной стороны, как человека, который сумел дать стране свободу. С другой стороны, его будут помнить как человека, который не сумел помочь России этой свободой воспользоваться.
Gorbachev is to be buried in the cemetery of Novodevichy Convent, the resting place for the ousted Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev and Boris Yeltsin. He is to be buried next to his wife Raisa. The Kremlin has not announced whether there will be a state funeral. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
United Nations nuclear experts have reached Ukrainian checkpoints on their way to the Russian-held Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant to assess any damage. But reports suggest shelling from either Russia or Ukraine is disrupting progress. Matthew Bray reports.
Russia's defense ministry claimed Thursday that Ukraine forces had attempted to seize the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant after troops crossed the Dnipro River but were being destroyed with helicopters. That is not verifiable, but it comes as the IAEA attempts to reach the plant to assess the state of it.
Without clarity, my mission is a technical mission. It's a mission that seeks to prevent a nuclear accident.
Whether the atomic inspectors can reach any clarity on the plant has yet to be seen. The Russians are reportedly shelling the agreed route that would allow them access. Alexander Staruk, the head of the Zaporizhzhia region, said an advance team could not move due to security reasons. Ukraine has accused Russia of seeking to wreck the inspection visit. Meanwhile, it is the first day back at school for Ukrainian children, but they won't be sharing memories of fun holidays with their families. For many, their stories are about surviving war, their last day at school being before the February 24th invasion of their country.
It does become kind of the new normal for children, which I think is, as I said, very concerning as well, because that's not the way children should go through life, thinking that they're going to get attacked at any moment.
4 people were killed in rocket attacks in the Donetsk region. One of the strikes was in Kramatorsk, in a residential area, a preferred Russian tactic. It is one thing to experience this on TV, completely different when you experience it for real, said this man who saw his apartment partially wrecked. Smoke could be seen rising in the southeast of Mykolaiv as Ukraine said it was pressing an offensive in the south. Ground forces are said to be striking at thin Russian supply lines, including bridges across the Dnipro River. Matthew Bray, TVB News.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has met with the British Chancellor of the Exchequer, Nadhim Zahawi, with a proposed European price cap on Russian oil at the top of the agenda. Yellen supports the price cap for 2 reasons.
The first, of course, is reducing revenues that Putin needs to continue waging his war of aggression. And the second is maintaining a reliable supply of oil to the global market and putting downward pressure on the price of energy for people in the U.S., in the U.K., and around the world.
Europeans are facing huge increases in energy bills driven by skyrocketing gas prices. The war in Ukraine has prompted Russia to cut supplies as sanctions were imposed on the country. Zahawi said he was optimistic a price cap would yield results, saying he was working on cost of living support measures for British households. That's the news. Thanks for watching.